Welcome to the Recruiter Abroad podcast. My name's Dalton Doherty, and in this podcast series, I will be bringing you the stories of recruiters who have emigrated all around the world. This week, I'm speaking to Graham Whitworth. He's currently a recruitment director in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and his journey has taken him from England to New Zealand to Australia, on to Dubai, and eventually to his current home in Kuala Lumpur. In the interview, we discuss his journey, what it's like to live in all these different countries, what the main difference is from a recruitment standpoint, and how he managed to eventually fast-track his career after a relatively slow start. Really great interview, great guest. Hope you all enjoy. We got great feedback from David Ayer's interview of how to scale a recruitment business. If you haven't heard that, go on back and have a listen to it. And let us know what you think. On a personal note, we have just had our second child this week. So apologies that this podcast is a day or two late. But family first. Priorities have taken place, and I hope you are all enjoying the World Cup and have a great week ahead. Graham Whitworth, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well.
Thanks for joining us on the Recruiter Abroad podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, Graham, I've given everybody a brief rundown into your background, but maybe you could elaborate and let us know how you ended up in this wonderful industry of ours.
How I got my big break.
Your big break, yeah.
Recruitment world. It's a bit of a funny one, really. I'll run you through it. So basically, I was studying in the UK, studying in Leeds. And while studying there, I was working for GE, working for General Electric. And I did the study thing and I did the work while studying thing. And upon graduation, I thought, well, I'm going to do the whole year out thing. And like many people before me, off I went to New Zealand with a work holiday visa and no real ambitions apart from maybe to work in a bar and maybe to do a bit of skiing and figure it out as I went along.
Where did you land in New Zealand?
I landed in Auckland.
What were those early days like?
Look, Auckland's a great city. I think to go to somewhere which they call the city of sails, I think they have more boats per capita than anywhere in the world, where you're 30 minutes away from dormant volcanoes, from beaches, from surfing. And obviously the Kiwis are notoriously friendly and welcoming people, big sport, mad culture. And quite happy to have us pommies over with open arms. So it's a good place to start off.
Yeah, and a good place to start off your career as well. Hayes are kind of known for the entry point. How were those early days?
Well, I think it was good timing when I got over there. It's a bit of a roundabout way how I transitioned into recruitment. Upon arriving in Auckland, my only experience was working for GE. So I gravitated towards working for GE again and went to apply to work for them. They were quite happy to bring me on board for 6 months or for 12 months, as per my work holiday visa. But as I wasn't a Kiwi, they were going to payroll me through Hayes. So off I went to the Hayes office and explained my situation, how I was going to be one of their contractors. And what I thought was a 5-minute conversation to sign a contract started to feel like an interview. And then they interviewed a few people. And before you knew it, I wasn't leaving my contract for GE. I was leaving with a job offer to become a consultant for them. So, it was quite a surprise to me. It worked out okay in the end.
Did you know what a recruitment consultant was then? Because,
I had an idea, but honestly, not really.
And so you got sponsored there. How was that process?
Hey, I think New Zealand is one of the easiest places to get sponsored. Back then, the minimum salary thresholds were quite low to become a sponsored employee. I think the education thresholds are quite low as well. And remember, if you're from the UK, you can actually work for 23 months for the same employer in New Zealand under the work holiday visa scheme, which gives employers plenty of chance to make a decision as to, whether they're going to extend you or not. I was there for about 2 years myself, the first 1 year on a work holiday and the remainder on a sponsored visa.
And was it easy to find a place to live and to get into the social scene in New Zealand?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, there's a lot of Brits working in recruitment all over the world, and Hayes obviously attracts a lot of Brits because of the name and the brand and the reputation they have in the UK. So there's many people of a similar age group in a similar situation to you who are trying to figure it out in a new country, and you and that group of people can make your own community, and then you can branch off into Kiwis and locals and Aussies and whatnot. And in terms of a place to live, I mean, Auckland, for those who haven't been, is a very small and walkable city. So I walk to work every day. Managed to find a condo quite central. And to be honest, it was a funny feeling in that kind of month 2, month 3, when I kind of reflected and thought to myself, oh, wow, this is actually quite easy. It's easier than I thought. I almost wish it was a bit harder because it's so easy I felt guilty. But yeah, it kind of.
What were you recruiting for?
That it was quite straightforward in the end.
What were you recruiting for in those early days?
I was doing banking recruitment. It was obviously it was a good time back in when I was at 2006. So the whole of the banking industry was going through huge deregulation, huge expansion, and that bubble which burst 3 or 4 years later was pretty much built upon very liberal lending policies, which obviously big recruitment companies who have partnerships with the banks, benefited from. So it was quite a hot market back then.
So what was it like being a banking recruitment consultant in April 2008?
In 2008, it was still pretty hot market. The 2006, 2007 were really good markets. 2008, there was some mumblings of things may not quite be right, and certainly by September especially, it started to slow quite fast. But
did you see the writing on the walls?
I'm an optimist, so I always said it was going to be this kind of 6-month correction, just a blip, and it'll all be back to normal. I mean, I've never known anything different. I just graduated, and all I've known is a hot market. I've never seen an up and a down. But a lot of people in the industry warned me that this wasn't something that was going to go away. And I really think any banking recruiters out there, even 10 years on, may say the market still isn't as good as what it used to be.
Wow. So you're at a point where you're relatively established in Auckland. You're 2 years in. It's been a bit of a dream. The writing's kind of on the wall a little bit. How did you make a decision to move to Australia? Where in Australia did you go to?
So firstly, there was a group of us who had kind of formed quite a tight friendship, and maybe one evening after a few beers and a bit of a barbecue, the talk of Australian dollars popped up. For those who are not aware, the exchange rate between the New Zealand dollar and the Australian dollar is very favourable towards the Aussie dollar.
Even more so back then.
Yeah, and the salaries in Oz are very, very good. I mean, they're crazy, to be honest. So, there's always talk of Australia for anyone who's working in New Zealand, not just expats. And I was sat in an office in Auckland, receiving the monthly top 10 in expat billers, and every single month seemed to be Perth. And up until that point, I couldn't tell you anything about Perth. The only thing I knew about Perth is that all of Hayes' top billers seemed to be from there. And that kind of sparked my interest, because I thought to myself, well, I've got no ties to Auckland. I've got just as many ties to Perth than I have to anywhere else.
Yeah.
And if Perth is this hot market, then what am I doing here grinding it out when I can be on a 4-hour plane journey away and start afresh? And that was the plan. That's what transcended.
I try not to jump into Perth too much because this is just a coincidence. I didn't know that you were in Perth before we started this conversation. But I was on a farm picking beans in Queensland, and I was standing. I was next to a little Asian woman who's been doing that for years, and she said, "Oh, listen, my sister is earning 100 grand a year as a cleaner in Western Australia." And I remember as soon as I heard that, I thought, "That's it. I'm going there. We're getting into recruitment." What were those boom years like for you whenever you went there?
So I was quite lucky. I joined a company called Chandler McLeod, who I think they probably still are the market leader in Oz. And they were certainly very, very well ingrained into the mining sector over there. So we were quite lucky where we had a partnership with BHP Billiton, which is probably the biggest employer. And they were going through a process of recruiting SAP. Now, I don't come from an engineering or mining recruitment background, but for Chandler McLeod, coming from banking and transitioning to SAP accounting was good enough for them. And it was literally a matter of if you had a qualified accountant who had done SAP and was quite happy to work on a roster, which was either 4-3, 4 days on, 3 days off, 8-6, they would take him in and they would pay. They'll take him in as a contractor or they'll take him in as perm. And it was quite lucky because I was in a hot market and I was recruiting pretty much, not exclusively, but over 50% of all my placements came from one place, and they just never stopped hiring.
Wow. Yeah, I remember being in that marketplace, and it took, I was there a couple of years later, and it took years for all the other firms to get on the managed service agreements. And I think Chandler McLeod had it all sewn up for years. So I can only imagine what that was like.
I flew out to some of the sites. So, we had such a good relationship that I would actually fly out to the mine sites if I had a batch of contractors starting in a particular week or on a particular project to meet up with the hiring managers or just to do a bit of onboarding. It was very much all hands on deck. But I love this. Get yourself in PPE, personal protective equipment, jump on a plane into the middle of nowhere, into a gold mining town or a steel mining town or an iron ore mine, and kind of figure it out on the ground. It seemed like a world away from the UK.
Yeah, my wife was working for Chevron, and she worked for BHP as an internal recruiter, and she had a lot of those experiences too. But kind of learning that whole mining thing and how that integrates into every other business function, it's very hard to describe to somebody who hasn't seen how that.
It's hard to describe. You can't imagine the size of a mine site until you've flown over it, because you just not. I just don't think you ever see something so big in the middle of nowhere ever. It feels very unworldly.
So at this point, you're starting to make some real coin as a recruiter for the first time.
BHP, mining's a good sector, definitely.
What was your lifestyle like? Like, was it? Did you have a plush apartment that had a gym in it, and were you living in a nice area of town?
Well, I was quite lucky. I mean, I was actually living with a guy from Liverpool who was working fly in, fly out on an oil rig, and his oil company gave him a very, very plush apartment duplex, and he was looking for a flatmate he could trust. We kind of had Liverpool Football Club in common, and he basically said, "You know what? Give me a little bit of money on the side, and you can have my the extra room." So not only was I earning good money, but I wasn't necessarily spending it on rent. So it was a double win.
Were you doing anything interesting on your weekends? Were you going down south or up north or to Bali like everybody else? Or?
No, I was staying in WA mostly. One of my friends had a boat, so we'd sometimes go out fishing. You can. It's basically 6 months of good weather in Perth. So my evenings were fishing, going to the gym, outdoors, kind of running outdoors is nice. Very much kind of a barbecue, beer, park kind of culture. We've got wineries and a lot of beaches close by. So it was very much a kind of outdoorsy place. Perth's a place for people who enjoy the outdoors. It doesn't quite have the glitz and glamour of Sydney, but if you like a simpler life, and you're quite happy just to be outside, then Perth is a great place for that type of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I was too young for Perth, to be honest. I think I'd probably enjoy it more now with kids and that. A lot of my time there, you know, I was kind of thinking, oh God, New York would be a bit more fun for this stage of life. But yeah, I suppose it just depends what you're into. So you're like 2.5 years in Perth. You're in one of the most amazing boom times at a recruitment company that's a core supplier to the biggest mining company in the world, and you're sitting on the seat making the money. Your cost of living's low. You've got a great lifestyle. You're loving it. Why did you give it all up?
Well, at that time, many years ago, when I was a kid, myself and my family all lived in the Middle East.
Oh.
So my mum had actually just accepted a job to go and work in Abu Dhabi. And she was raving about Abu Dhabi. I should come over, and tax-free money, and I could stay with her, and it'd be good to see me again because I've been away for a few years. And I got a classic headhunt call from Charter House, and Charter House in Perth wanted to hire me, or wanted to talk about the potential of hiring me. And I kind of said off the cuff, I said, the only place I would never change jobs in Perth. And the only place I'd ever work is Dubai or Abu Dhabi. So I don't know if you've got an office there, but that's the only thing I'm interested in. And that off-the-cuff comment turned into a few follow-up calls, an interview, and ended up me being in Dubai.
Wow. Maybe you could let us know, Dubai, right? Are the streets paved with gold for recruiters? Does it come easy? Like, you've gone from probably, I would say, the easiest gig in the biggest boom happening to going to a completely new environment. Was it the same? What were the core differences?
I've seen probably more people fail than make it. Dubai can make or break people. I think it's down to people's maturity and tenacity and a whole range of things. The people who I see who don't make it in Dubai are people who are maybe, they don't take their work too seriously. They think they're in Dubai. They think it's money when it actually is tough as well. It's a grind. It's very, very competitive. Fee margins are getting squeezed, and there's a lot of penny over there. The people who kind of get sucked into expat lifestyle and try and something they're not too fast, whether they get a personal loan they can't quite repay, or a car that they don't quite need, and they try and live a flash lifestyle without really earning it. They live with credit. And I've seen a lot of people get burnt in Dubai because of this, for sure.
And tell me, percentage rates in Perth are around 15%. They might even be less in Auckland. Less or more in the Middle East in those early days?
Less or more fees?
Yeah.
So the fees in Perth, yeah, you're looking at about 50, 18, something like that. Probably similar in Dubai, but they started to get 12s and 14s started to creep in, for sure. Especially when Dubai experienced a bit of a downturn, there was a bit of a downward pressure, for sure.
And so your life in Dubai, I'm not a real expert on Dubai, to be honest with you. I find it a hard place to do international rec to rec, because every UK recruiter is just jumping at any opportunity, and it kind of makes my job a little harder. What's it like when you arrive there? Like, are you living in a for a better word, like a community compound? Is there laws on drinking? How did you find those cultural aspects?
Look, I'm super lucky because my mum already works there. My sister at the time was working in Qatar with her husband, and my brother joined me soon after I arrived. So I had a family network in Dubai
Wow.
straight away. So I had a bit of a launch pad. I had a place to stay, and I could take my time to get myself set up. There was no super rush. But for people who don't have that, which is the vast majority of people, I think the thing which they find a shock is that the rents in Dubai are very, very high, and most landlords expect 6 or up to 12 months rent upfront in one go before you can move in. So you can't really turn up in Dubai with nothing, especially if you want to get your own place. You do need to have a little bit of money behind you just to get yourself set up. And I think, that first 12 months, I think a lot of people finish that first 12 months with basically less or exactly what they started with. They certainly don't put money in the bank in that first 12 months. I think they're too enjoying themselves.
The complete opposite to Perth in the boom time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of distractions in Dubai. It's extremely easy to spend a lot of money on shopping, on alcohol, on a car. Credit is very easily available. It's very tempting to get credit and to get debt and to get cards. It's extremely tempting, and I've seen lots of people make that mistake.
And tell me, Graham, how do salary packages work there? I believe they're a bit different. Do they incorporate like your living costs in many cases, and how does that work?
Yeah, so all salaries in the Middle East are in 3 components: basic, living, and housing. The reality is that all these 3 get bundled into one, and you get paid that cash into your bank. So you don't necessarily see the packaging or how it's broken up. There are some employers who, instead of giving you an allowance for a house, may give you an actual property to live in. But I think generally speaking, they will give you the allowance, and you can choose to do with it what you want. Yeah.
Did that feel like a bit of a pay cut coming from Perth? You must have been like on close to $80,000 on a base in Perth, and you're going to a place where they're like you had really cheap accommodation in Perth. Luckily, you're the only one who had that, by the way. But
well, you know what? It's tax-free money in Dubai, so you've got to appreciate that. And even though Dubai has a reputation for being expensive, it's very similar to working in Perth. The cost of living is not dissimilar to Australia. So for me, when I looked at the tax, it was pretty much a like-for-like salary because it was tax-free. And yeah, I think it was just opportunity for that new adventure. And
what were you recruiting then?
So when I first moved over there, I was focusing back on banking again because Dubai was still going through quite a strong banking market. So it was kind of back to what I knew. And it was, Dubai is a funny place. It has local banks which service the local market. It has a very, very big Islamic banking space. And funnily enough, a lot of Western banks do Islamic banking. But it's also the hub for international finance for the region due to it having a tax-free banking zone or a free zone. And our office was walking distance to this free zone. So even though I was in Dubai, most of the people I'd be dealing with on a day-to-day basis were actually, Brits and Aussies and Americans. It felt very.
And when I look at your time in Chandler and McLeod, you almost had a free swing at it. What was it like setting up a desk in Charter House in Dubai in those times?
I think I took a longer time approach to it. I knew it wasn't going to be quick money. I think there was quick money available, but it didn't necessarily. I didn't have to rush it. I kind of took the time to build relationships. I really leveraged the whole my family live in the Middle East, which I thought was made it a little bit easier. I think the key was to really break the banks up into their segments. Who are the international banks? Who are the local banks? Who are the Islamic banks? And really start to appreciate that even though they all operate in the same industry, they operate very, very separately. It's a very network type place, Dubai. I think a lot of people come and go. But if you put the effort to network, I think that can pay off quite well.
And when did it start paying off for you? Was it like year 2, year 3? Because you were there for quite a while, right?
It paid off quite quickly. The first year was probably better than my second year. I just got quite lucky. I hit the ground running, and I actually started to do some recruitment for the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the actual Prime Minister of Dubai. I actually ended up doing some recruitment for his private investment vehicle, doing some debt restructure roles for him. Although I didn't meet the Sheikh himself, the people who I recruited for would work, semi-closely with him. And that really opened up a lot of doors, gave me some credit really quickly. And just one of those quick wins, which I never planned, but I just happened to have a very good person who happened to be a very good fit for what they were looking for. And, put 2 and 2 together, and that opened a lot of doors for me.
And around this time, 2015, I was in an oil and gas town, and it wasn't an easy time to be a recruiter in an oil and gas town, and a lot of money in Dubai centered around that. Did you find that dip troubling at the time, or were you so centered around the banking that it was no problem?
Yeah, it was certainly more difficult. It was certainly more of a grind. You certainly had to put more in to get the same amount out, and I was very aware that it wasn't the hotter market that it was. And yeah, I think some people exited Dubai about that time, or a lot of companies scaled down a little bit for sure. And it was it definitely quietened down by the time I left. It was starting to dry up for sure. But yeah, I mean, the timing I was there, I just caught a rebound in the market. It wasn't too bad, but it certainly wasn't boom time years, or it certainly wasn't easy money for sure. You definitely had to work for it. But when you did earn it, tax free. And obviously, in recruitment, we earn a percentage of people's salaries, and the salaries in Dubai tend to be quite good as well. So you end up working quite senior jobs that you may not otherwise get to work on UK or in Oz.
So you're at a point now where you're up and running. It's all good, and you think, oh, I'll have a crack at another country. How did this come about, and what was next for you?
So it was a very kind of roundabout situation. I've been in Dubai for about 4.5 years. Also spent a lot of time in Abu Dhabi and in Qatar, and with Charter House actually helped them open an office in Qatar because my sister lived there. So I used to go over, stay with her, do a day's work in Qatar every week until we built up a portfolio big enough to open an office. And things were fine. I was certainly not looking to leave. I was quite content, to be honest. And then a friend of mine, or an ex-colleague of mine who I worked with in New Zealand, was passing through Dubai on the way to the UK. And I caught up with him. And of course, I gave him the Dubai sell and told him how this was a good place for him. How it's a great place for recruiters. And, as long as you work hard and you're diligent and you focus on your candidates, it's a good space to be in. But then he sold me something a little bit different that I'd never really thought about. And he sold me the idea of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And so it was kind of a very roundabout way that I go all the way back to New Zealand, and the people I work with in New Zealand connected me up with opportunity here in Malaysia.
Wow. So what was Kuala Lumpur like in comparison to Dubai? It's still a Muslim country, right?
Yeah, still Muslim. I mean, both Dubai and Kuala Lumpur are very liberal. I certainly think Dubai has. So the preconception people have with Dubai is they think it's like Saudi Arabia. They think it's very, very conservative, and they think it's very much, compound lifestyle. You can't go out. Women can't drive. That type of stuff. The reality of Dubai is it's very different. It's a party town, effectively. All the big nightclubs are there. It's extremely liberal as long as you do it in the right place. So there was, I think there's some big preconceptions with Dubai. The preconceptions people have with Kuala Lumpur is they think it's like Bangkok. Their expectation is, a bit sleazy, maybe a bit poor, third world country, poor infrastructure, bad traffic, dirty place to live, or not that glamorous. That's people's preconception of Kuala Lumpur. The reality is that KL is very, very similar to Singapore. It's very modern, first world. And for anyone who's from the UK but doesn't live in London, like myself from Liverpool, coming to KL felt like a big international first world city for sure.
Wow. Okay, cool. So you're starting again. You're in. This is when your career, from the outside looking in, I'm not pretending to know you really well, but it looks like your career starts to accelerate. You're starting to climb the ranks and have maybe a bit more success in the industry. What was it that drove your career on at this stage?
Yeah, I think up until my move to KL, I was very content with being, maybe a solo operator or someone managing a small team, 1, 2, 3 people. And I'd always looked at recruitment as a job and an opportunity to earn good money in a job which has, maybe not lots of stress and responsibility, but certainly a job rather than a career. I think my move to KL coincided with me being 30. And at that point, it was, well, this is a career move for me now. Let's put the job to one side and let's build something and build some roots here and build my name with a big company like Randstad. And there was certain reasons why I was attracted to them, and it kind of worked out okay in the end.
What were those reasons, may I ask?
So, not to offend people who work for Randstad, but Randstad, when it comes to permanent recruitment, are quite poor. They are very, very behind the curve, when it comes to permanent recruitment. They are a temp recruitment company. They are a Kelly Services. They are an Adecco. They are a Manpower. That is Randstad. Now, they wanted to be a Hays, and they still are progressing in that direction. And what attracted me the most about Randstad was just kind of how poor they were and how much they needed to do. And I really felt I could be someone who could be a big value add for them. But I really thought it could be a job where I would stand out very quickly, because I've kind of built desks and built divisions previously, and I thought, you know what, these guys are really struggling, and if I can get it right here, then I'm going to have a career with this company that could go take me places.
It's interesting you say that about Randstad. That was my preconceived idea of them as well. But I have worked with them since, and they have taken a lot of Hays leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they've implemented a lot of the things like that, but maybe with a bit of a softer edge.
Yeah, they're off the company. I mean, look, the person who hired me from New Zealand was ex-Hays. Obviously, I'm ex-Hays. Our other associate director was ex-Hays. So there was basically one guy from Randstad who hired 3 guys from Hays to run the show for them. Now, look, the Malaysian market, they haven't made a profit in 22 years. They're still struggling for profitability all over Asia and all over Australasia. But, they've got a plan. And I think if they could adopt even half or even less than half of what Hays do well, then they would turn the corner.
And so what's your life like in Kuala Lumpur? Like, are you in a massive city? Are you living outside it? Like, socially, have you integrated into the local scene? Like, can you give us an idea into that? Because it's an area I know nothing about.
Yeah, I think when you look at Asia, a lot of people gravitate towards Singapore and Hong Kong. That's people's first reaction, isn't it? And for the people who I know live in Singapore and Hong Kong, they live in very much those expat circles and expat bubbles. For me, Malaysia isn't like that at all. There are much, much less expats. In our office, for example, here we've had up to 50 consultants and only maybe 4 or 5 expats out of all of them. And that's quite common with a lot of companies. There's a lot more emphasis on local hire rather than expatriates. So there's a much, much smaller community. And as such, you build friends outside of that community. I'd probably say my friendship group is half Europeans or expats and the other half local Malaysians.
Wow.
I really feel I've kind of been able to integrate myself a little bit easier here than other places for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah. And from a business perspective, you're doing construction and like, is that a lot of local candidates? You're obviously recruiting in English. Is there any challenges to that or anything you have to be careful of from a cultural perspective?
So yeah, I mean, aside from Singapore, Malaysia has the highest English competency rate in all of Southeast Asia. People are taught English from a young age here, and a lot of people study overseas as well, Australia, UK. So language barrier is few and far between, to be honest. The one thing to think about any developing country or second world country, which Malaysia would be classified as, is that it has an incredibly large skills shortage. So if you're good and you're Malaysian, you may have job opportunities in Singapore. Maybe you stay behind in Melbourne after you graduate. And it's very, very, very difficult to find good people in Malaysia. I think that's the biggest difference. Whereas maybe in Oz or in the UK, maybe it's still a candidate-rich market. Maybe you still got a lot of applicants. Maybe you can still rely on LinkedIn. Whereas in Malaysia, it's extremely candidate short. And
I'm guessing your fees reflect that.
What's that? Yeah, the fees are much higher. Yeah, 20 would be a minimum over here, and 30 is not unheard of. But 20, 22, 25 are very, very common.
And so, in terms of like, I'm taking it salaries are a lot lower than they would be in.
Oh yeah.
So you need to do quite a lot of placements.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the salaries are a hell of a lot lower here than they are in Australia, but we're working at 25%, not 12. So yes, the salaries are lower, but the fees are higher, and you know what? The cost of living here is a lot cheaper. Now, dollar for dollar, there are many places you can earn more money. If you've got a mortgage to pay back home, then off you go to Singapore or Hong Kong. If your plan is to send that money home. But if you're looking for a career and you're spending your money locally, then yeah, it can go very far, and you can have a very nice lifestyle here. Although when you go on holiday, it does feel expensive.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds nice though. And what with what type of places do you go on holiday or locally? Like, there's a lot of islands around there? Do you go to the Philippines?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky because KL is the hub of Air Asia, which is the equivalent of EasyJet. So, within a 4-hour flight, you can be in Bangkok, you can be in Phuket, you can be in Singapore, you can be in Bali, so you can go further afield. You can go up to Hong Kong, you can go to Korea. So weekend breaks and short trips, there's so many options in Southeast Asia. And then, I think we are very spoiled here. That it feels like we're in the Europe of Asia, where everything's so close and so varied and so cheap.
And with recruiters who might be interested in going to Malaysia, is the visa process complicated? Is there a lot of opportunities for them?
The visa process is quite straightforward, to be honest. The minimum salary thresholds are very low, so any recruiter, expat recruiter, would be over those minimum thresholds for sure. Degree holder, I think, makes it easier, but it's not a prerequisite. So the visa process is quite straightforward. It's about finding employers who want to take expats. As I said earlier, the expat to local ratio in my kind of 8 to 10 to 1. So you're not going to walk into Michael Page and there's going to be 10 or 15 or 20 expats there. It's going to be a lot smaller group of people, and the questions they're going to be asking are why Malaysia, and how long are you going to be here for, and can we trust you? So I see a lot of people doing internal transfer. It's probably the easiest way to go.
And so this leads me on to my kind of final question. What's going on with you at the moment? Tell us about your business, and how walk us through that.
So I had a great time of it at Randstad. Starting from me plus one person to go to me plus 13 in 2.5 years. was great, and to really make a name for myself inside Randstad. I think ultimately, it was, I saw more opportunities in Malaysia than maybe they did. I was quite lucky that some of my friends were very well connected to the new government, as we've had a government change recently for the first time in 2 generations. And with that, an opportunity came up to join a smaller company, but with very strong political connections, and to work. Our new clients right now are some of the government-linked companies and government-backed companies. So yeah, it was just kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make a transition, be a bit more independent in how I work, and to get involved with something super exciting with this new government.
Okay, well, what a fantastic story. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing it with us. You've been on the run more than Jason Bourne, and I found it fascinating. I've learned loads, yeah, thanks so much.
Perfect. No worries at all. No worries. Great to be here.
Take care, pal.
Cheers. Bye.
A massive thank you to Graham for coming on the show. I learned a lot because I didn't have a clue about anything about Kuala Lumpur and the market there. I don't do a tremendous amount of work in Dubai, so it was interesting to get his take on that and the differences and maybe some of the risks of people who want to move there and how hard it is to be successful there, but how great it can be if you do everything right and live your life the right way. And look, if you're enjoying these podcasts, please do send it to another recruiter and let us know. Really looking to get as much feedback as possible. And every week the downloads are steadily growing, so that's great, and we really enjoy doing it. And look, we are an international Rec Direct, so if you do want to discuss your own career, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to take a call.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.